Hello everyone and welcome again to Modern Applied Statistics for Fisheries. I'll give you a quick overview of the course content and a few more logistics for the course. And then I will also ask you to work through the first lab that may, for most of you, be a review of just basic data manipulations using R just to for those of you who have maybe less experience, you might learn a thing or two that'll help you be better prepared for the labs in class. So my goals for the course here are that by the end of the class, you'll be able to read, to understand, and to critically look at papers that use any of the methods that we use here. This is really kind of an overview class, survey class of a variety of modern applied statistical methods, and I would like you to become more literate in understanding those methods and how they used in the literature. Also, of course, for you to be able to apply these, to first be able to choose an appropriate statistical approach for a particular question and the data to try to answer that question, that you get a better appreciation for the large variety of approaches that exist to analyze, ecological or environmental or other data, that you'll be able to recognize and avoid, and if you can't avoid them, to appropriately deal with common problems and pitfalls that may arise in data analysis, and basically figure out how to apply any of the methods that we cover here in class. And last but not least, I want you to be able to confidently communicate the results from any of the analyses here, both orally and in writing. And I'll cover how to communicate some of the results from typical analyses as we go through examples, and you'll get a chance to practice that both in your presentation and in the written report at the end of the semester. As for some course logistics, the course material, including all the lecture material, scripts, instructions for the lab. Sometimes I have separate instruction files, data files, and any other material will be available through modules in Canvas. I have a separate module for each sort of major statistical approach that we'll cover, and a module may cover 3 to 4 lectures or more in some cases. There's also reading material that I'll post, PDF files and book excerpts. We'll do lab exercises on Wednesdays, and you'll have to bring your own laptop for that. And we may also do labs, or labs may come up anytime during class, so be sure to always be ready to launch R and work through examples and script files that I'll share. As for other software that you might need, just Word and Excel would be nice for just reviewing some of the data sets that I'll share, although I'll share all data sets in CSV format typically, maybe some in text format. Word for homeworks and things like that. You'll need a PDF reader for the reading. For R, I assume you'll have R installed on your laptop. Use version 4.1 or higher, and then I strongly recommend that you use RStudio as an editor. So if you haven't used that yet, you just go to this link and download it. That'll make your life a lot easier. There'll be some homeworks, probably more on the lower end here, 5 to 6 homeworks, and that includes a student project. I typically post the homeworks on Wednesdays, and they'll be due the following Wednesday or perhaps later at times. Submit all homeworks and really all assignments through Canvas unless instructed otherwise. I have office hours on Tuesdays, 3 to 5, or by appointment. Just shoot me an email or ask me in class if you want to meet at some other time. I'll also be available here in Juneau in person or via Zoom by appointment. For the office hours, I have a Zoom meeting set up, so during office hours I will always start that Zoom meeting so you can connect. You'll be put in a waiting room and I'll let you in when I'm free. And if for some reason that meeting is not started, if I forget to start it, just shoot me an email and I'll try to connect as soon as possible. The course, as I already mentioned, is organized in modules structured around the specific methods that we'll cover, and each of the modules and each lab that goes with these modules is more or less self-contained. The module may include lecture material in both PDF and or PowerPoint format. Then there's always an R script for sometimes for the class, for the lectures, and for each lab certainly. I do use Markdown files on occasion. If you haven't worked with Markdown files before, that's an opportunity to kind of familiarize yourself with that. And I may share our data objects that includes a number of both data and script and other R objects. I may occasionally do an Excel demonstration just for illustration, because it's sometimes easier to show things in Excel. The data files that I'll share and upload that you'll need for the lab are typically CSV files, and then there will be reading material, and there's generally a lab associated with each module, and all the reading material is also in your files folder on Canvas under readings, or there's a module that includes all the reading material for the course. As for the class policies, I typically expect you to attend unless you let me know that you're not going to be there. If you have any conflicts with field work or are going to a conference or something, you can't make it, just let me know as soon as possible. If that overlaps with exams or other important dates, I will arrange to make that work for you. But it is your responsibility to catch up if you're traveling. You can always connect via Zoom if you can squeeze that in during travels, or if you're in the field. Everybody pretty much has access now. Even if you're out in the Chukchi Sea on a boat, you can typically connect if you want to nowadays with Starlink on the Sikuliaq certainly. The lectures, I will also always record lectures and then share them through Canvas. In Canvas, you can always go on the left-hand side. You have a menu of options. There should be an option labeled My Media, and you can always go there to look for the recordings. If I haven't posted the recording yet, just let me know and I'll do that. It doesn't become available until a little while after class usually, and sometimes I just forget to post it. So just let me know if you're looking for one that you can't find. All of the labs are mandatory, and mostly it just involves showing me the results during class, or show them to me later when, in case you're missing a lab. The exercises are mostly fairly basic. I provide most of the code. You may have to figure out a few things on your own. Sometimes I will ask you generally to work in small groups. We'll divide people up into small groups at the beginning of the semester, and you'll work together in groups to kind of learn from each other, because everybody has different strength, and so you can help each other work through some of the lab material and exercises in class as well. I strongly encourage you to be an active participant in class. Interrupt me and ask questions if anything is unclear. It helps you to talk through concepts too, in class or in the discussions with your group members when you do labs, just being able to explain things to somebody else is always super useful. That's the best way for you to learn things, so you can kind of help out each other that way. For as far as the requirements go, or the expectation for your background here, you should certainly have an understanding of basic statistical concepts, including statistical probabilities, things like the mean, the variance, correlations. You should be familiar with simple hypothesis tests like t-tests and f-tests, or Walt's t-test for testing the significance of a regression coefficient. I assume that you have covered at least simple and multiple linear regressions and basic ANOVAs. I will do a little bit of a review to interpret output from some basic linear regression analyses before we go into more complicated models. You should also be able to read and manipulate equations, and of course I expect you to have some familiarity with R. Like I said earlier, I will provide most of the code that you'll need, but for working in your own project, for some of the exercises, some of the labs, it definitely helps to know how to code in R. You'll have to be able to at least understand what's going on and do some, make some basic changes to the code. And then finally, I assume you are a proficient writer for the purposes of the homeworks, if there's essay style questions, and for the project certainly you'll have to produce a complete document in a technical writing format. As for the course content, I'll do a bit of an overview talking about statistical testing and estimation, different measures for estimating parameters. We'll start with some basic exploratory and graphical analyses, and then the different estimation methods that include least squares estimation, maximum likelihood estimation, and I may briefly touch on Bayesian estimation, but I'm not really covering that in class here. And then we'll do a survey of a number of modern statistical modeling methods, and that's basically starting with the linear models, which I assume will be a review, and then we'll cover a variety of models that basically deal with all the violations of the assumptions of that we make when we fit basic linear models. In real life, and most ecological data sets are one or more of the assumptions of a typical linear model are usually violated, and that is usually violations of the IID normal, or independent and identically distributed normal residual assumption that we make when we fit linear models. So the models beyond the linear model are generalized linear models, generalized additive models that add flexibility in terms of the functional relationships. We'll also talk about nonlinear models towards the end of the semester, spend a fair bit of time on mixed models and on models that account for spatial and temporal autocorrelation, so spatial and time series modeling. This is just a very big picture overview of all the different kinds of things that I'll cover. And whoops, yeah, I accidentally skipped over it. Apparently I can't go back here, but you'll see that that overview throughout the semester as I kind of walk you through the different aspects that I cover in class. For the lab exercises, again, I usually provide pretty detailed instructions that you can follow to work through the lab exercises in small groups usually, or independently on your own if need be. And sometimes I have the explanations all embedded in the script file, so you can just read through the script file. Sometimes I have them as a separate PDF file, and sometimes I have markdown files, so there's sort of a mix of modes here. You can take a look at the course outlines for the course outline that's linked from the syllabus for more details on the kinds of things that I'll cover and the sequence in which I'll cover them. The labs will hopefully typically line up with lecture material and follow the material that we covered in class in either the preceding week or earlier the same week. So you can kind of directly reinforce the concepts that you learned about in class. Then the student project is a large part of your grade here, and it's an important part of the class, and you'll be using some statistical modeling approach that's sort of in line with the material that we cover here to address a specific problem. So you'll have to first of all define a very clear problem, to be very clear about the questions or a question and objective that you might have for that project. I want you to keep that contained to a project that is doable with a few hours a week as part of a class. Don't get too ambitious. Don't expect to write a complete thesis chapter as part of the class here, but you can certainly get some aspect of your data analysis out of the way that relates to the work that you're currently doing. So you should have all your data ready to go. So make sure you pull that data together that can address the problem or the question that you have, with all the appropriate response and explanatory variables. And I'll talk more about sort of this, how you may structure the data for the analyses at a later date. You'll be doing an exploratory analysis of your data, and you can follow some of the templates in class, or just in general do an exploratory analysis, and including mapping your data and summarizing key aspects in a table and so forth. And then you may be testing specific hypotheses, developing kind of a conceptual and then a statistical model, and fit suitable models to test your hypotheses, or to test the conceptual models that you develop, and look at the diagnostics to check and diagnose the model, and if you fit multiple models, you'll be doing model selection to compare different models and select the best model or subset of the models that you may be looking at, and then based on the best model or a set of models, you'll draw conclusions from that, and write up the results, first as a draft about halfway through the semester, and then a final draft that's due at the end of the semester. And then you'll also get a chance to present your results in a short 10-minute presentation in class at the end of the semester. So again, start early on selecting an appropriate problem or question. And I really can't stress enough the importance of thinking about the question that you're trying to answer rather than starting with data that you have collected and trying to figure out what you can do with it. Hopefully what you might be trying to achieve, formulate that in a clear objective, and then consider the data that you have and how that may help you address that objective. So you should have one of the homeworks, homework 3, that'll come up in about week 5 or so, is kind of a first chance for you to provide some background information, and oftentimes people draw that from their thesis proposal or a draft paper that they've already started, and then you want to introduce the problem, introduce the question, provide a rationale for the problem and the question, describe your data that you have to address that question and the general approach that you may be thinking about using. But for that first homework, we haven't covered that much by then, and so you may not have a really good idea of how to tackle the problem, but to the best of your ability, you can maybe foreshadow how you might tackle that problem, kind of conceptually. But I'll help you with that, and you don't have to fully flesh that out until the final draft report is due, which is or the first draft report of the final report, which is due by about week 10 or so. And we'll do a peer review of that, so you'll be reviewing two other reports and give each other feedback. I will not review that first draft, but you'll get peer reviews from 2 peers in class that will hopefully help you improve the draft and make sure it's readable and understandable by somebody who hasn't seen what you're doing before necessarily. And then the final report is due at the end of the finals week. As for the evaluations in this class, like I said, the homework, the project is a pretty large chunk. It's actually 30% total between the student presentation and the written project. Written homework assignments are another 30%, and then the quizzes are 20%. That's quizzes on Canvas, so most modules have quizzes associated with them that you just submit online through Canvas. And then participation, that includes the lab exercises and submitting solutions to lab exercises, and participation in class and in lab is worth another 20%. So just a few other comments on statistics. Statistics can be as much an art as a science. Statistics is hard. It takes a long time to kind of wrap your head around how some of these statistical methods work. It can be intimidating. Concepts are hard and just take a while to sink in. And you're not alone in struggling with that. I certainly struggled with that when I first started learning about statistics. It just didn't make a lot of sense until you start working through some examples, and it's really an iterative process where you learn some theory and background, apply it to some examples, do some reading, maybe take another class to reinforce the theory and background, do some more reading, work through some more examples, which is really probably the most important part, to work through lots of examples. And eventually, hopefully, it'll kind of sink in. But again, it's not easy, and I don't expect you to become experts in any of the methods that we cover here, really, because again, this is kind of a survey class. I'm really just scratching the surface, and you'll have to do a lot more work to really be able to fully apply and understand the methods that we're covering. But in class, if you feel totally lost, please do ask questions at any time in class. Usually if you're totally lost, it's most likely not your fault, but mine for not explaining things very clearly, or for assuming things that I shouldn't assume. So please do ask, and I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability, or point you to other material to better understand the methods that I'll cover. So was that just a quick sort of overview of how to plan and implement a research project that hopefully is useful as you think about your student project for this class as well. And so this is kind of based on, perhaps a thesis or dissertation where you select some kind of research project for one or more scientific publications. And so you start with selecting your overall subject, and maybe kind of with sort of a provisional title. Oops, sorry, I went ahead here, and I can't go back on that. But so you'll start with broadly identifying the subject area, identify some questions that you want to ask about that or a particular problem to be solved, and then usually you identify some hypotheses, or maybe construct some conceptual models of how you think things work that kind of address that problem, that sort of that may be boxes connected by arrows, like cause and effect type diagrams that you construct to help you think through a problem. And most of this is usually based on a literature review, on input from your advisor or from colleagues, lots of reading usually, and it can also be kind of an iterative process to refine questions and problems and construct conceptual models, and maybe revise your questions after talking to others and thinking it through some more. Once you have a set of questions, and ideally kind of a conceptual model or specific hypotheses, then generally that's when you go to design an experiment to kind of address that question. Most of you here may be are already past that stage, because you presumably already have data in hand. You may or may not have been involved in designing an experiment. You may be using available data that you get from databases or from others. So you didn't really design the original experiment, but you're using data that is available to address different questions. But based on the experimental setup, or the data that you have collected, or the data that you have access to address your questions, you then select a method for analysis. And so don't The biggest mistake, I guess, that I often see people make is, they learn a new method here in class, and then you have a hammer and you find a nail. Your problem, you apply it to that. You want to apply that hammer to your problem, whether it's appropriate or not. That's not really the way to go about it. Always, think through the problem and then think about the methods that you have covered or that we will cover in class as you get a better understanding of those different methods to figure out the most appropriate method for that particular problem. So this part here, the experimental design and figuring out what methods to use, that's certainly informed by statistical textbooks and classes and what we cover in class here. Data collection itself, is informed by statistics, and again, you typically already have lab or field data in hand, or data from existing databases, and hopefully have already organized, analyzed, interpreted the data that you're working with to some extent. But that's really where this class comes in. That's that heavy arrow here. I'll help you with sort of organizing the class to some extent, but mostly in analyzing and interpreting the data, and that involves perhaps testing specific hypotheses and fitting models to data, and then presenting the results and conclusions at the end in your final report and in your presentations. A lot of times, or sometimes, it might turn out that you can't quite answer the questions that you started out with, so that may require kind of an iterative process. If you have insufficient data, you may have to go back and collect some more data and redo your analyses with more data. Hopefully that'll solve that shortcoming. Or you can simply not collect the appropriate data. Then you may have to go back all the way to the beginning here to kind of redefine your questions and problems to a set of questions or problems that you can actually address with the data that you have access to. So hopefully that kind of helps you a little bit in kind of thinking through the process here and the sort of general scientific process and how statistics and statistical methods fit into that process. Finally, an assignment. There are actually two assignments. One was reviewing this recording here, and I also am asking you to review part 1 of module 2, the recording for that, before our first meeting on January 21st. And then on January 21st too, for the lab, that is the same day, be prepared to work through the lab exercises. So have our up and running know-how to get the data files that you may need and the R scripts. You can download those ahead of time or at the beginning of class, but make sure that you know how to organize things in R, so you can dive right in. We'll work through some exercise in class. The homework 1 is also will also be actually, I have to think about how to structure that, but homework 1 I'll probably assign at a later date, so I'm not sure when that's gonna be due yet, but we'll do some in-class exercises next time, as well as in the lab. So be prepared to work through those. And I think that